mighty rebellion against predictable radio and podcasts. The Last Show with David Cooper.
It is time for Technology Time. We are joined by tech analyst, tech expert, and friend of mine, Carmi Levy. Some people call him Random Access Carmi. Does anyone call you that, Carmi?
No, because that shortens to RAM Carmi, which quite frankly has some implications I really don't want to get into or have to explain to my wife. So maybe Random Access Carmi would work on its own.
All right. RAC, I think. Random Access Carmi. And never mind. Let's talk about this act that has been passed by the U.S. Senate. It's not signed to law yet, but it's basically trying to protect people with whom deep fakes create fake images of them, fake videos of them that are awful. We're talking like dark stuff, like pornographic, things like this, which I would want myself protected from that, even though I don't really care if anyone sees me naked. I don't want anyone to generate images of me and then, I don't know, blackmail my employer with them. Or if I'm a young person, send them to all my college peers. Or just, people can do really awful stuff with this tech. And I do think there needs to be some protection.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ultimate nightmare scenario, and certainly we've seen it over the past couple of weeks, specifically with Grok, where, regular unsuspecting people are posting images of themselves, as people often do, to their X account, and then complete strangers are grabbing those images, running them through Grok, nudifying them, sexualizing them, putting them in bikinis or taking off their clothes, and then distributing them to their followers, at which point they go viral. So imagine that level of digital victimization. I mean, it's a form of virtual sexual assault, and you have no control over it as a victim. And so what this, it's called the Defiance Act, and it's probably the best acronym ever coined. It stands for Disrupt Explicit Forged Images and Non-Consensual Edits, for Defiance. And it was sponsored by a Democratic senator, and the Senate has now passed it unanimously. So everybody agreed this is necessary. It ensures that anybody who's been victimized by non-consensual, sexually explicit deepfakes of themselves, that they can take civil action against the people who have done so. So it at least gives victims an opportunity to level the playing field, to seek some kind of justice against these cretins who are doing this online using AI image generators like Grok to persecute this kind of crime.
Now, it's weird. They're being kind of technical about it. They're not saying the very generation of it is the problem. It's like the hosting of it. Could I use this act? Suppose someone did something awful like this to me. Could I use some mechanism on X or Twitter? I'm still calling it Twitter. I don't care.
Twitter forever.
To cause them to then immediately take down the post? What would the mechanism be for me? Can I just sue? Because that seems really difficult. The average person doesn't have access to a lawyer and a lawsuit. Is it sort of like a Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown? Which, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, that's like if a pirated video gets posted to the internet or some copyrighted content gets stolen, I can just submit to YouTube and say, hey, that song that someone added to their video is mine. Please take it down. I don't have to go to the courts to do it necessarily. Is it more like that?
It's kind of like it, and what it does is it works in concert with legislation that was already on the book. So that piece of legislation was known as the Take It Down Act, and that was passed earlier last year. And that requires the platforms to remove the content when asked to do so. So it doesn't stop the content from showing up in the first place, and I think it'll still occur. Tools like Grok can continue to exist. They will have no guardrails preventing this kind of thing. The law doesn't compel them to put those guardrails in place, but it at least gives options both to victims to have it to go after perpetrators with civil action, and it also, in concert with the Take It Down Act, requires the platforms like X, like Grok, like OpenAI, like anyone, to remove the content once they become aware that it's there. So a little bit more protection now than we've had previously. Still doesn't address the root cause of the problem, because those image generators are still there, and there's still no law that requires image generators to explicitly stop these kinds of assets from being created in the first place. So if Elon Musk decides to remove the guardrails, they've said that they're going to prevent Grok from doing so in future in response to this latest controversy. If they decide at some future point in time to remove it, there's nothing in law that sanctions them accordingly. And that's a bit of a problem. It means we still have a ways to go in terms of putting laws in place. And of course, this is only in the U.S. North of the border in Canada, there's really nothing equivalent. And so if you really want to continue to perpetrate this kind of crime, you just move to Canada and keep on keeping on.
Ooh, I do have a Canadian passport, but this sort of crime is not interesting to me.
No, but now you said it on air, so now they're watching. So
now, on the one hand, we've got the Senate passing a law that seeks to maybe curb Grok or Elon Musk's X's AI thing. It's probably the most off-the-rails, widely available AI product offered by a large company. On the one hand, they're potentially curbing some of the behavior of this AI bot, or at least what happens to content generated by it. But then on the other hand, in the U.S. government, we go to the Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War or whatever. They're announcing they want to use Grok AI into military software. So, like, which one is it? Are they going against Musk? It's like they don't know what the left hand and the right hand are doing.
They don't seem to know how to read the room. I mean, on the one hand, you have Grok going off the rails and being rightfully spanked for it. And countries around the world are, for example, Indonesia and Malaysia, they are banning Grok now because of this controversy. And then the U.S. Essentially saying, okay, we know that Grok is problematic, but we're going to put it on all of our systems at the Pentagon by the end of the month. So Defense Secretary...
What could go wrong?
Exactly. What a great idea. So Pete Hegseth has said he wants to integrate Grok into the Pentagon's networks by the end of the month. And that includes every unclassified network and, more troublingly, every classified network throughout the Defense Department. He says it's part of their AI acceleration strategy, which is basically use AI to remove barriers, unleash experimentation, focus on investment, blah, blah, blah.
I don't want that in military software.
That's the scary thing, is that, architecturally, Grok we know is problematic, and now you're going to combine that without a whole lot of due process here. It's not like they studied this for years to make sure that it was safe, or that it would ensure that classified military American data wouldn't end up in the wrong hands or wouldn't be shared in some way with, let's call them bad actors. So the checks and balances, the protections for this, what is essentially the most sensitive of all data, just simply aren't there. And the fact that it's Pete Hegseth, oh my God, just no. I mean, the headlines for this are already being written now, and it's only a matter of time before we see the first scandal blare because of this. This is just one of those bad ideas that, quite frankly, smarter people in the room should have stopped, but for whatever reason, they didn't.
I'm just thinking classified information and the most notorious AI model for not having guardrails. You mix those together, I don't see it getting good results, I gotta say.
I find it amusing that before the U.S. went into Venezuela, they specifically did not inform anyone in Congress. So on the congressional committees that oversee the military, they were not advised. And what was the excuse was because they were worried that there were leakers there. Never mind that all these people on these committees, all these elected officials, have national security clearance, and it's been done in the past. There have never been leaks associated with them in the past. And now they're willing to, so they're so worried about leaks, but now they're just going to layer over Grok on top of very sensitive Pentagon technology infrastructure, and they think that there are no leaks at all. That, to me, is just unreal.
Every day at Sierra, you'll find top brand apparel, footwear, and gear for 20 to 60% less than department and specialty store prices. And during clearance time at Sierra, those incredible prices are 40 divided by 2.5, carry the 1, even lower. And when you shop clearance at Sierra, you can save a whole lot more on everything you need to get active and outside. That's a lot of saving. Epic brands, vast selection, teeny tiny prices. That's Sierra. Visit your local Sierra store today or shop online at Sierra.com.
Apple's App Store. If you want to install software on your phone or on your iPad, you have to use it. You may not think much about that, but what that means is Apple has to approve everything you install on their platform. A platform that does that is not an open one. And there are people that would like this platform to be open. There are app developers who don't want to have to pay Apple a cut to put their software in their app store. And that's what we're going to discuss here with Carmi Levy. There's a group in Canada that seeks to break up the app store. Carmi, welcome back to the show.
Good to be back. Yeah, this is a story that's been festering for a very long time. Almost as long as app stores have existed, there's always been this push by developers, smaller organizations, smaller companies, possibly competitors, who essentially say that they bristle at Apple's imposing of those rules that they say prevents competition, prevents consumer choice, lowers quality, increases prices. And now they're called the Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic, and they filed an application application with Canada's Competition Tribunal, basically saying Apple's dominance is harming the market. It's harming developers, it's harming consumers, it renders them with less choice, and it also puts up barriers to anyone else who would want to get into the market, because Apple's rules are so stringent that they essentially form a block to anyone else who wants to come in. And they are saying they would love for Apple's App Store to be broken up completely. Kind of a bold move because, this is Apple. But at the same time, I think they're sending a message.
Walk me through what it would look like if the App Store was open. For example, Google's platform, they've got an equivalent App Store-like thing. I don't even know what it's called. The Play Store, I believe is what it's called.
Google Play, yeah.
But if you are a software developer and you want to release stuff and not go through Google's platform, you can still do it. It's a bit tricky. It's called side loading or whatever. I kind of get it. And so it's sort of the best of both worlds. Google gets to have their walled garden. They get to approve everything, blah, 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 just like Apple. But if I, an owner of a phone, really want to install something that doesn't do that, I can still do it. With Apple, you can't do that. I know I just asked you what it would look like and then described what it would look like. But tell me what a world would look like where Apple wasn't so locked down.
So, I think the reason Apple has given for its approach to this relative to Google's is that it wants more control over the user experience.
Over the money, Carmi, over the money.
Oh, of course it is. That's the quiet part. And we're saying that out loud. But the quiet part is, or the not so quiet part is that Apple says it's concerned about security. It's concerned about bad actors getting malicious code into Apple's ecosystem, which would ruin kind of the integrity of the iPhone, the iOS, the iPadOS platforms. And so that's been Apple's excuse. But of course, if you're a developer, you got to pay your 30% cut to Apple. And there are very specific rules about what you can and cannot do. For the longest time, you couldn't put links in your App Store entry. And so you couldn't direct customers to your website, for example. You couldn't set up your own payment system. You couldn't do in-app payments. And if you did, Apple could very well ban you from the platform. And it did so many times. Remember what happened with Fortnite when Apple and Epic were engaged in this battle. Epic set up a paid, a separate payment system. Apple banned them from the App Store. Next thing you knew, they were spending years in court. So that's really that's what's at issue here, is that Apple makes rules that it says are required for the integrity of their environment, whereas competitors say, no, it just blocks us and it hinders competition, hinders innovation, and it essentially kills our business and doesn't allow anyone else to get a leg up. And so it's the existential question. Do you believe Apple? Do you believe the outsiders who say that those rules should be loosened, in a more Google-like way? And so, as the Competition Tribunal looks at this, it's going to be asking those questions and bringing those stakeholders in to, share their piece. And obviously, 180 degrees apart, hard to tell who's going to win, but it's an important conversation to have because this is how the digital economy works, at least today. Might change tomorrow, but at least for now, this is how we get stuff done on our phones, and this is how the money flows.
Well, if you think about desktop or laptop operating systems like Mac OS or Windows, if I want to install some software and pay a software distributor on by doing so, let's think like Photoshop or any app where you have to pay money for it, Microsoft and Apple get 0%. They get no cut. This is an open system. I can install whatever software I want, and they get 100% of whatever I pay. If I do it on the phone, Apple's taking a 30% cut. What, just for the pleasure of listing it on the App Store? That's insane. And there's nothing stopping them from next year turning it up to 35%, 40%, 90%. It's just made up and it's totally monopolistic. And I get Apple saying, okay, we want to have consistency on our platform. We want to guarantee safety, blah, 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 blah. But that cut seems so arbitrarily high. And for what, Carmi?
Because Apple says that it's like it built the playground, so it gets to make the rules. It crafts the infrastructure, it pays for it, therefore it takes what it says is a reasonable cut of the proceeds. Of course, if you're on the other side of that equation, you have a very different opinion. And so I think it's a reasonable argument to be made that the world has changed since the App Store was first set up, and that all the cards now sit in Apple's hands, and maybe that's not necessarily the most fair way to go about it. The problem that I see here is that, who is the Canadian Internet Policy and Public Interest Clinic? And does Canada's Competition Tribunal have the power to impose this change on arguably the world's most powerful technology company, using an app store that, quite frankly, has become the standard for how we get apps onto our smartphones and tablets. That's a pretty big lift for just the competition tribunal to have, and I kind of wonder where this is going to go. Makes for a great headline, but legally, economically, would this stick globally? I just don't see it happening.
I don't, unless the U.S. regulators come down on Apple for their monopolistic practices with the App Store. I don't see it happening.
And exactly, and given politically sort of the change that we've seen in the relationship between Washington and Silicon Valley over the last year or so, I just don't see that happening anytime soon. I think the interest is in maintaining the status quo, at least until technology renders this entire argument obsolete. When AI takes over a lot of those workflows, instead of downloading apps onto our phones to get stuff done, we'll simply, as you can do in ChatGPT today, we'll simply tag their partners to get things done. And at that point, the notion of downloading an app becomes very quaint indeed.
We got a couple minutes, but I want to stay in Canada here to like the internet regulators. They're the same organization that prevents me from swearing on the radio, the CRTC.
Darn.
Sort of. Darn. Sort of the CRTC. There's another thing called the Canadian Broadcast Standards. You know what? I'm not going to get into it. Okay.
CBSC.
There's a new rule saying that streamers, like Netflix, Amazon, this sort of thing, they have to disclose certain financial things in Canada, and streamers are really upset about this. Walk me through it.
So this is part of the Online Streaming Act, which of course is now law in Canada. And so the CRTC is trying to figure out, well, how do we determine when Netflix and Amazon show a movie or a TV show on their services in Canada, how do we figure out if it's qualifies as Canadian content? And radio's been dealing with this for decades, of course. They're taking that CanCon regulation and they're carrying it forward, trying to modernize it for the streaming era. And one of the things they want streaming companies to do is share some information on everything that they produce. So like if you produce a TV show or a movie, you have to share details on what makes it Canadian, right? So where's the director from? Where are the actors from? Where was it filmed? And just as importantly, what are the financial statements attached to these projects? And that's where the streamers are pushing back, and they've sued the federal government. They're in the Federal Court of Appeal, and they're essentially saying, we do not want to share our financial information with you. That would affect our competitive position. Why would we want to do that? And so you have a government that wants to update CanCon rules. You have streaming companies that have been saying all along, we don't want to pay you. We don't want to adhere to your rules. The Canadian government doesn't get to push us around. And now they're suing them because they're asking for financial data. Yet another big battle between big government and big tech, and on the streaming front.
We'll see what happens there. I guess these companies mostly operate out of the U.S., and so they're just going to kind of use that as a way to maybe shirk the responsibility in Canada. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, they just want to collect revenue from Canadians. They don't want to pay back into the economy, and they certainly don't want to get bogged down with bureaucratic overhead, which includes pulling together information and sharing it with Ottawa. So this just continues a trend we've been seeing for a very long time.
One of the top stories right now, an entire internet shutdown is going on in the country of Iran as protests happen throughout the streets, and the technology behind it, how quickly it happened, how it's almost impossible to contact anyone in that country or someone in that country to contact other people is just startling. I'm here to discuss it, go over it, talk about what it all means with Carmi Levy, a tech analyst. Carmi, welcome to the show. You were here earlier. So good to have you back.
I'm back. You don't really get rid of me that easily. I just kind of keep hanging around until someone comes up to me with a broom.
Okay, noted for next week.
Bring your broom.
This internet shutdown that's now been going on, for a few days, it is wild. Like the whole country is cut off in a way that I don't think I've seen before.
No, this is next level. We've seen these kinds of outages before. Repressive regimes, regimes that aren't necessarily democratic, that, want to oppress their people. They tend to use telecommunications outages, forced telecom outages, as kind of a tool to stay in power, to maybe quell protests and things like that. And so Iran has done this a dozen times over the last couple of years. We saw it in 2011 during the Arab Spring. Egypt, Libya, other countries used the same thing. We've seen Myanmar, the Sudan, they've used it as well. And so this is just kind of a go-to. We see it all the time. But what's different about this particular outage, and it started, it's been just over a week. It started a week ago Thursday. And essentially what Iran is is doing is, so phone service, mobile service, internet service, all of that gone within Iran. So citizens cannot communicate with each other. They cannot access online resources. Also, just as critical, traffic flowing across the border. They've shut down the interconnects, the gateways that allow international data. And so Iranians can't see out, and the rest of the world can't see in. And of course, as the government cracks down with some pretty heartbreaking violence, it makes it very difficult, and that's part of the regime's strategy, very difficult for anyone on the outside to truly hold the regime accountable because there isn't video evidence of it. And even more troubling is normally when there's an outage like this, a lot of folks these days use Starlink, so that's the satellite-based internet service, and it also supports phone. They'll just use a satellite receiver and continue connecting that way. But what's interesting here is Iran is using some pretty heavy-duty military-grade jamming to keep Starlink down largely across the country. By some estimates, about 80% of the country, Starlink will not work, despite the fact that SpaceX, which owns Starlink, has said that service across Iran will be free for the foreseeable future. So
now we've seen similar stuff in Ukraine, but then people were able to get around it.
Exactly, and in that case, it was Russia trying to fog out Ukraine and ensure that Ukrainians weren't able to connect. So Russia's been using its own form of jamming, but it's very brute force, not very targeted, not very precise. Whereas in Iran, it's almost like surgically precise, and they're still allowing their own government services to continue to work. So the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he's been posting to X throughout all of this, so obviously he's got access.
I'm sure his people are. I don't think he's running X. He's an old dude,
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe he's still using an old BlackBerry, and their Telegram channels, government Telegram channels, are, according to intelligence experts, still active as well. So they're being very selective, and normally outages last 2 days, 3 days, maybe. This is over a week, and it shows no signs of ending, even though we are seeing the return of some mobile international traffic. Some voice traffic seems to be getting through now. So, this is Iran. They're not just keeping their citizens in the dark. They're establishing a new high-tech template for how this is done. And you can imagine that countries like Iran and China and others are watching this very closely and thinking this is a new template for how they too can impose limits on connectivity both within their borders and between themselves and the rest of the world. And that's what's troubling here. Is it means other countries are watching, they're learning, and we're going to see more of this in future when things get hot for regimes that aren't necessarily friendly to their people.
It looks like in advance of all this, the country really invested and really thought hard about how to block out the internet in like a very sophisticated way, rather than just saying like, hey, take down the cell towers because it's last minute and they're worried, which was more along the lines of what happened during the Arab Spring. I think a lot of these countries that were having these mass protests were like, take it down as quickly as possible. We're not quite sure how to do it, but just take down the cell towers. Mm-hmm. And there were ways to like get in and out. There were ways, to get around it. This seems like much more sophisticated. I don't know if we've seen this template before.
We haven't. And the fact that we've seen like some services, they were out and then they were back on and then they were off again and then they were on and off in certain geographies, that it was almost like somebody was flipping a very precise switch in Tehran and controlling accesses that they wanted to control, which suggests a very high degree of sophistication, suggests a very sophisticated protocol in place. In other words, there's a lot of institutional knowledge now within the Iranian government to engage in this kind of, let's call it what it is, electronic warfare. It isn't random. It isn't them scrambling to just, call the phone company and have them turn them off. You actually have people, these are probably their jobs, their job descriptions, and they've had years now to build up expertise in how to turn services off and on to support the regime's aims. And I think that's what's really terrifying, is that the government decides to devote resources to this kind of activity against their own people. And of course, if you're an expat Iranian, and there are a lot of them in Canada, it means that you have much less ability to see what's going on. There are people here who have not spoken to their families throughout this entire period, and that makes an even troubling and heartbreaking period in history even more difficult to manage from afar. And I think that's what gets me here, is that, for all the technology that we have on the outside, there's nothing that we can do to see what's going on the inside of Iran's borders.
I don't want to, betray any of your privacy, Carmi. I'll just say someone in your life who's Iranian was telling you like they can't contact their family when there's such mass unrest in the country. It's scary to hear like a protest went on in your hometown. Some of your family is still there. People may have been killed or injured or arrested, and you can't even call them to see if they're okay. Like on an individual level, these stories are scary for people who have loved ones in that country and can't contact them.
They absolutely are. And, and my inbox has been just burning all week long, speaking with, my close friends who obviously still have family there. My one friend, his parents have been dark since this first started, and he doesn't know if they're okay. And he has no way of verifying that. And he's just hoping against hope that it's just that they don't have connectivity and that they're home and they're hunkered down and they're all right. And so it sort of makes you realize just how much we take connectivity for granted here. And, quite frankly, that we need to recognize that what's happening half a world away is having local impact here. And if you know of anyone who's dealing with this is the opportunity to reach out and be a voice.
I'm just thinking like selfishly, like, okay, what if the internet gets taken down in New York and me and Miranda aren't home together? Like we got to make a plan. We don't realize how reliant we are on technology to like get in contact with our loved ones and know where they are. And I guess make a plan if the internet goes down, even if you're in a country that's not experiencing unrest, because I don't know, if this tech goes down, we're kind of screwed.
Most companies, government agencies, they will have disaster recovery plans or business continuity plans. We should have the same thing individually. And it's as simple as, it could be as simple as writing down the phone numbers of all the people you know, making sure that you have that conversation with your closest loved ones. What do you do if the cell phone doesn't work? What is our backup? Keep change so that you can use payphones. Those might still work in the event of an outage. Little things like that. But whatever it is, have the conversation now, because we cannot take these technologies for granted. We can lose them here as well.
I feel like young people, like Gen Z, at the risk of derailing this conversation a bit, they don't know anyone's phone number. And I'm like, well, if I get, what if I'm in the subway and I look like a dude who committed a crime and they arrest me? I mean, they're going to let me off. They're not going to charge me, but I'll get my one phone call. If I don't know my girlfriend or my brother's number, which I do, I'm going to be stuck in jail,
Yeah, we've allowed technology to make us a little bit soft. And maybe this is the time that we should reverse that a little bit, go back to manual and start memorizing things. Because if all of your contacts sitting in a cloud service are no longer available because that cloud service has been taken down, what do you do? And if you can't answer that question, it's time for you to start thinking about what that answer should be.
Carmi, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about this story with me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, David.
Carmi will be back after the break because this show is all Carmi all the time. I'm kidding. No, we're done with him for tonight, but I do appreciate your time. Thanks again, buddy.
Thanks, man.
Welcome to Survivor 50.
February 25th on Global.
We chose you to represent 25 years of the greatest adventure on television.
It's the biggest season ever.
The twist is going to open up Pandora's box. Now I see Zach Brown on Survivor.
Welcome to Survivor, Mr. Beast.
Feels a little like a high school reunion meets a massacre.
Survivor 50th season, Wednesday, February 25th on Global. Stream on Stack TV.